Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the human experience. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. You know, when we're going through healing journeys, there's so much heaviness. We fail to recognize that 90% of our lives are actually good, and only 10% of our lives is filled with constraint and negative feelings. And when we try to do too much, our lives become heavy. Sometimes we need to take a break from our healing journey, our growth journey, our expansion, and learn to just be in the moment. In today's one-on-one deep dive, we're looking at how to give ourselves a break where everything doesn't have to be so trying all the time. We look at how a thought is formed and this particular part of the brain that helps us brain hack our way into finding joy. I even give you 5 simple steps to help bring this space of brain into your fullest capacity, using it to cheat the negative experiences and give yourself the best of everything. Let's not waste another second. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. Boy, it's been a hell of a week. How about for you? How are things going for you? There's so many people that I care about, that I treat, that I, experience life with that are struggling right now. And I saw a social media post the other day that really got my mind in a healthy space, in an interesting space, but a yes, that's it space. And I want to share this with you. And I want to start off this conversation by saying everything in your life cannot be hard 100% of the time. Life is complicated. There is complexity to it. But you have to find joy or at least some source of peace during difficult times. Because life is hard. It has its ups and downs. But finding this experience of being able to instruct the brain to have a better response, to live in a new way, gives us this feeling that we have some sense of control, and that constant change and disruption doesn't have to eat us alive. Sometimes we feel like we have no control and that the power of choice is taken from us, that all we have to do is survive. And that keeps us in a space of not being able to really focus on something beautiful for ourselves. Confucius had a quote that I really love because it's so true. It's what I run up against every single day. And that quote is, "Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated." I'm going to say it again. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. We have a hard time finding joy. We have a hard time letting life be, whether that is a health problem or a loss or breakups or housing issues or natural disasters. And we turn to these moments and say, why? And we have to look at the disruption of these moments, and that is being able to really hone in our thought process, own our experience, and know that life cannot be hard 100% of the time. There has to be something more. So as that social media post came across my feed, I watched it so many times. It was on Instagram. I can't even tell you who the original maker, or maybe it was shared. I don't even know, but it was a glass of wine. And it was filled all the way to the top, and it was a beautiful red color, red glass of wine, and it was running under a faucet. And it was saying that this is the way of trauma. When we have it in our glass, in our bodies, it's settled. It's there, but it's not necessarily disrupted. But when we put it in the sink or the stream, the flow of healing, it's all of a sudden disrupted and it's being poured out of the cup, out of the body. And it takes a while, right? So this massive glass is now having its liquid disrupted. It's pouring over the side, but it takes a long time for it to run clear. All of the color has to be removed and it has to be replaced with clear, with light. And as I watched it, I thought that is the truest example of not everything has to be hard. Not everything has to be in a space where we struggle. We want to be able to look at our experience and instead of leaning towards complication, finding simple solutions, finding something that we can hold on to and realize that we have this complexity bias in our brain where we trick ourselves into thinking that the 10% of hard that we experience on the day-to-day has greater value, is more important than the 90% of ease that we experience. Think about that. It's that glass. I have 90% clear, but I'm still focused on maybe that 10% of residual color at the top that is staining my glass. When we look at healing, when we look at life changes, when we look at the world around us, it is absolutely time to look at our 90% of ease and understand that the trick our brain is trying to take us to, this 10% that everything is hard, absolutely takes us over, takes us down, and gets us into a place where joy is lost. And that we forget that there's more for us other than constant worry, constant stress, anger, frustration, unhappiness. There is that silver lining. And we have to be able to unlock our experience from chaos to some kind of self-control and some kind of self-greatness, authority. It's that fresh breath air that allows us to connect. So let's talk about your brain. Let's talk about your thoughts. Let's talk about the fact that what you think about, in fact, grows, and that we have the ability to change our experience, to let the glass run clear, to be able to hold on to the 90 and let go of the 10 and realize that there is more in your life that isn't so complicated. There's more in your life that is fulfilling. And you don't have to be exhausted by the day-to-day. You can be fed with the ability of greatness and which already exists in your life. So we've talked a lot about thoughts on this show. We've talked a lot about thoughts if you follow me on social media or on Insight Timer. But I thought we'd get a little bit geeky because we all know that we love brain science here. And we'd talk really about the formation of a thought. We'll talk about the RAS system, which you may have heard me talk about, or if you've taken my course on affirmations and how to use them correctly with the brain science and chemistry, you've heard the RAS conversation. I will bring that forward in this conversation too. And we'll talk about finding surprising benefits of joy and how we have to stop feeding the drama of our lives and get into a space that we can very quickly, step by step, 5 simple steps, retrain our brain into finding something more for ourselves. This is an exercise of self-discipline. This is an exercise of allowance. This is an exercise of understanding that no matter what we do, we can find some sense of joy, some sense of happiness. So let's talk thoughts first. Like I said, we've talked a lot about how thoughts really get validated in the brain, but do you know how a thought is formed? I'm going to give you the really elementary version of what happens. Of course, it's much more extensive, but let's talk about it. So, your neurons release a brain chemical, and that chemical is known as neurotransmitters. Keep that in the back of your mind. We can actually talk about that when it comes to joy very shortly. But when the neurotransmitters are released, it generates an electrical signal to its neighboring neurons. And that signal then creates a wave of electricity to thousands of neurons, which leads to thought formation. This is an incredible process. Think about what has to happen in order for you to have a single thought. And with so much electricity, so much generating within the brain and body, for you to simply have a thought, isn't it a waste to be using this magnificent process to break yourself down, to stay in stress, to stay in pain, to stay in depression, when we have somewhere between 50 and 60,000 conscious thoughts every single day? That's for the quote average brain. And it does go up from there. Of course, if you're an overthinker, you might be in 75,000 conscious thoughts. If you have ADHD and a brain that rapidly fires at maybe 100,000, it's a lot. It's so much that's happening. And then think about the fact that your brain's number one job is to keep you safe. Something has to occur for the brain to have a little bit of downtime to conserve energy. And what happens is it creates patterns, loops in your thoughts, loops in your brain, in order for it to have instructions where it doesn't have to think about the next behavior. It doesn't have to think about the next thought. It doesn't have to think about putting one foot in front of the other and carefully going to do the next thing. The brain pattern gets reinforced, good, bad, positive, negative, indifferent, by it firing over and over again and creating these neuro grooves in which the brain says, I'm going to do that. When I'm stressed, I'm going to do this. When I'm worrying, I'm going to do that. When I feel worthless, I'm going to do that. Or when I'm happy, I'll do this. Or I get to do that when this goes right. You have to think about, with all of this happening in the creation of your mind, you have to be super selective about what you focus on and what grows. You have to think about what gets in that cup of wine and spills over and over again until everything's clear. You have to decide what you want and how you want it. So, we've talked about the RAS system, and trust me, this all comes to be when we talk about not everything has to be so difficult, because your difficulties, your struggles may seem like an outside environment, but really it happens within your head first. It's your connection to your life, to the things that are happening, as to the amount of struggle, the amount of pain that you're in. And you have to understand that your immune system can be strengthened by your mental state, where your immune cells have the receptors for your neurotransmitters, or it can be decreased by your stress hormones, your pain, your depression. Joy, as it's stated, helps us live longer. Happiness helps us live longer. Constant worrying takes us down. It's a matter of what poison are you picking? And I mean poison by you have to do the work to maintain your thought process, or you have to let it all go and be in the thought process and watch it come forward in your daily existence. If your thought process is that of a victim, you will find ways in which you are a victim in your daily life. If your thought process is that you're a super badass and everything is working great and in your favor, that's exactly what you're going to find. The RAS system, the reticular activating system, helps us understand the conscious thought. Your RAS system, which I call the bouncer, the club bouncer of the brain, is the gatekeeper to what you experience out in the world. Your sight, your smell, your sound, the taste, the touch. It's all about perception. It helps us understand and read the world. It helps us understand that there's more around us, and it takes in information and makes us really connect to our environment. When we have heavy stress loads, when we are not living in joy, when our cup is filled all the way and everything is hard, the RAS is known to be damaged or weakened. And that's where we see these things that weaken us, like Alzheimer or ADD or ADHD, autism, depression, fatigue, especially chronic fatigue syndrome, PTSD, Parkinson's disease, schizophrenia, seizures, traumatic brain injuries like stroke or concussions. There's so much that we can talk about when it comes to the RAS system. It really is how we relate to the world because it controls our consciousness, our fight and flight response, our focus, even our GI tract, even the pain and self-perception and our wakefulness or our sleep. It really is the flow of energy within our body as it controls our perception, the consciousness. So science likes to call it the gatekeeper. I like to call it the bouncer. And I want to give you an example. If you've taken some courses of mine or you've listened to some of the podcasts where we talk about the RAS system, I give this example often, but it's really one of the best examples that I can come up with. And it's if you were a child and you were in the car and you played I Spy, or you played Yellow Punch Buggy, where you were looking for the yellow VW bugs, or now just any yellow vehicle, or perhaps the license plate game, where you were looking for a particular number order or a particular state or country, whatever it might be. What happens is we're giving this RAS system, this flow of consciousness, some pre-instruction. We're telling it, hey, I want to find all of the yellow vehicles on the road. And you can go back to what you're doing and not think about all of the yellow vehicles on the road, but suddenly they start appearing. Many people like to use that as I manifested something. And yes, you did. You gave the RAS, the bouncer, an instruction to look for the thing in which you are seeking. If my brain can bring a thought and I have the ability to give an instruction, wouldn't that mean that I have the ability to create a new focus, to create something that doesn't feel so heavy, to make my experiences work for me instead of against me? The answer is yes, and I hope you can feel like chills running down your body, because if I can change what I'm thinking about and I can use brain science to do it, and I know that my brain wants to go to the old pattern, but I can test it, I can push it, I can use my neuroplasticity, meaning my brain is ever learning, ever expanding. It means I can change my life. I can change my experience on the day-to-day without a massive struggle. I can make whatever I want to happen for myself, and I don't have to do it in a way that is so difficult, because healing and doing these journeys, finding self-discovery, moving through anything makes us tired. It takes a lot of energy. And the best way to deal with that is to reduce the energy, to be kind to ourselves, to take the breaks, and to brain hack our way to it. Right? If I have to do something that's strenuous, I'm probably not going to do it all at once if I don't have the energy to get there. And life's ups and downs wants us to engage in the hard, because again, we ignore the 90%. We listen to the 10. We're saying it's easier to reflect in the negative than to sit in the joy. It doesn't all have to be hard. I'm going to give you a step-by-step to get into a space where we remove the idea that changing our mindset, looking out in the world, is heavy, hard, and impossible. It's 5 simple steps. And then I want to give you the difference of how to lean into joy and happiness in a way that doesn't feel like it's just the biggest activity in the entire world, like it's the most activity, right? Because we're going to use that brain science. We're going to use our brain's superpower, which means it is flexible. It's ever growing. So if everything's hard right now, if your focus is that everything just kind of sucks, Remember that we are the ones who like to overcomplicate things. And also remember that your focus grows. What you focus on grows, what you think about grows, what you feel grows, everything grows. And you better be willing to allow the growth to be positive, or the growth will own you. Plain and simple. So step one, in getting into a space where life is not all hard and we're changing our mindset, is to give your brain, the bouncer, some pre-instruction. What do you want to focus on? We go back to those 4 questions. What do I want? How do I want to feel? What do I need? And how am I going to get there? If I go to that, I actually have the instruction for the bouncer. I know exactly what I want my bouncer to do. I know exactly what it needs to do in order to feel its best. So think about that. What do I need? What do I want? And how am I going to get there? If I give my brain a focus of feeling good today, what's going to happen? The RAS system is going to take a look around, right? And decide, what is it that I want to create? Okay, I want to feel good. I'm going to look for evidence like the yellow punch buggy to provide that to the brain. I'm going to find the places that feel good. And then step 2 is I'm going to check the thoughts that come in to see if they match my pre-instruction. I'm out in the world, I'm doing the things, and then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I'm not feeling so hot. This is not good. This is not how I wanted to feel. Today sucks. And I check in and say, does that match my pre-instruction? And if it doesn't, then I have to go to step 3, which is to decide if I need to pay attention to the pattern that's come up for me, the thought, or if I need to just move away knowing that that thought isn't helpful and it's most likely just a practiced pattern, the pathway that I had already given my brain as instruction to the moment. So I want you to think about that. Sometimes we run up against these moments where what we want and the pre-instruction hits an old experience, an old thought pattern, and we have to break it down. Is this what I want? Is this how I feel? Is this what I'm really looking towards and really what I'm needing to do? And if it's not, then you can redirect yourself. Maybe something's come up that does need your attention and you have to decide what you're going to do with it. Maybe it's that you need to heal a little bit more around that thought pattern, or maybe you need to have a conversation with someone. Maybe something has come up that has been in the background of your mind and in that subconscious space that is getting in the way of the pre-instruction. So you have to examine it. Does this deserve my attention or doesn't it? And step 4 is deciding what triggered the awareness to begin with. What we tend to think of, especially because of social media, that a trigger is something that is awful. We have to stay away from our triggers. Triggers can be a good thing too, right? We could be triggered into joy. We could be triggered into greatness. We could be triggered into understanding something that needed to be cleaned up in the first place. It doesn't have to be this big thing that causes shock and sadness and anxiety and overwhelm. It can be what it truly is, which is a guide into a path in which you've already created. It's this sort of cheat code in the brain that says, oh, I know exactly what we're doing here. We've been here before, and this is how you responded, and this was the event, and this event feels very similar to that. So here's the instruction manual, in which we used last time that you created because of your feelings and thoughts. And so you don't have to focus on it anymore. It's really this simple. That's a trigger. That's it. Sometimes they're workable and we can use them, and sometimes they are not. But we need to know where that trigger came from. And number 5 is to create a redirection point. I love to use the example of a roadway. And you're driving down this road, and there's potholes every once in a while, and you have to navigate around those potholes. And then you get to a place where the road is clear and it's all beautiful, and you slam on the brakes because traffic is completely stopped. Too many thoughts, Too much going on in the brain. Brain's overwhelmed. It's trying to look for any out it possibly can have. It's tired. And you have an option. You can stay stuck, stay in the thought, or you can take the gravel road that's next to the road and get off and find some kind of joy, some kind of mechanism that helps you. We've given the brain pre-instruction. We know how the brain is actually allowing things to come into the space. We put ourselves on the road, and we have to decide, how are we going to support ourselves in this mindset so that everything doesn't feel overwhelming? First things after these steps is to accept support. First and foremost, when life is hard, we have to be willing to seek help and support and then accept it. Healing, going through trauma, having hard times is a space where we tend to isolate, and we don't want to isolate. We want to accept support. So whether that's from a loved one or a support group or a therapist or a friend or a colleague, the most important thing is to get into the mindset, open to the thought, that what I focus on grows. Life doesn't have to be all hard, and I can get help so that I don't have to stay here all the time. I don't have to stay on the road and sit in traffic when there is a free gravel road that I can take right now, and that I get to my destination so much easier, so much better, right? And then we have to connect with others. We want to be around like-minded people. It helps us connect not only with ourselves, but the world around us. And when we know, like that thought, like I just want to feel good today, that that's truly an option for us, then we truly are allowed to get into a space of getting into joy. If that's an option for me, it's an option for everyone. We also have to work with our feelings and not against them. Remember, think about what Confucius said in the very beginning of this conversation. Life is quite simple, but we like to make it complicated. Well, you have to feel your feelings. You have to accept them. The key to healing, the key to making life not so difficult is to understand the emotions in which you are having. It's okay. Spend time sitting with yourself, understanding the complexity of your feelings, of your emotions, and knowing that your brain is trying to do its best for you and show you what needs to be addressed. You can give the pre-instruction that I want to feel my feelings, and the RAS is going to provide that into your stream of consciousness. You can practice self-care. You can avoid recreational substances because so often we're tempted to drink or do drugs or shop, whatever it is that's going to make the brain stop thinking and feeling. But guess what? It never works. It always incites more trauma. We can take breaks. That's the other thing. As that visual of the glass of wine spilled over the edges of the glass, the very first thing that I thought was, oof. If you're putting that much physical energy into healing, turning the faucet off every once in a while is okay. It doesn't mean that you are stop doing the work. It just means that I need a reset. I need an emotional downturn for just a moment. I need to turn off my brain for a second. Because if I can turn it off for just a second, I can actually breathe. That stream of consciousness is necessary. We have to also get into this benefit of using those neurotransmitters and giving ourselves a bit of joy. Because like I said, as I've said many times throughout this conversation, 90% of everything is good and 10% is bad. I, for one, would much rather stay in the 90. We use those neurotransmitters in order to fully feel our life. Now, joy and happiness are often used as interchangeables. They are technically two different things. Happiness actually is the pleasurable feeling, the emotion that results from a situation, from a thought, an object, something, okay? And joy is a state of mind that could be found even in hard times, even in grief, even in uncertainty. Joy is what we're going for. So if we work on cultivating that understanding of 90% is available to me, I can start looking towards triggering joy in my life. I can trigger short-term happiness in my life. No matter what I'm doing, I can give my brain that pre-instruction that not everything has to be hard. Sometimes I can turn off the faucet and I don't have to sit in the bubble over of my life. I want you to understand joy and feel-good neurotransmitters are these things that we have running through our system all the time. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. The good news is that as our life changes, we can increase those neurotransmitter levels. It's that ability to have that happiness feeling, to be more connected, because what we're doing is we're giving the RAS and the brain the instruction to increase these things. The effects on the neurotransmitters on the body are so broad. It helps us speed up our heart rate. It helps us feel more connected. It promotes happiness feelings. So what we want to do is lean into our 90, realize it's not all hard, and that we can turn on the faucet for the glass, take care of the 10% by giving the instruction to the brain, and still live in joy. Sounds like a lot of work, right? But I guarantee you, it is the most fulfilling when you realize I can stand on one side, do the work, and also live a really healthy and productive experience that doesn't feel so damn heavy all the time. I can stand in the middle, one toe on one side and one toe on the other. Like I've said multiple times, life doesn't have to be so hard. So how can we increase joy? How can we increase these transmitters? How can we get into a space where we're giving the brain pre-instruction and feel good? We can perform regular physical activity. I want you to think about what happens when you go out for a long run. Those neurotransmitters really fire up, or yoga, or lifting weights, or just moving the body at all, because I want you to go back to the original thought that we had when we talked about how our thoughts are formed. Neurons release brain chemicals known as neurotransmitters. That signal becomes electric and fires to its neighbors. That firing creates a wave of electricity, and then a thought is formed. If I'm doing something to create waves of electricity, I'm probably giving myself the ability to feel something different. And by the way, that probably is 100%. Okay? You can dedicate yourself to others, meaning volunteering. There's no greater sense of joy than focusing on how you can help someone else, and it provides that brain with the pre-instruction that we are of service. That's what life is about, is showing up, doing this purpose that you have, giving of yourself, and living. If you do that, you will increase your joy. You can connect. You can connect with your friends, your family, with your spiritual side. Do something that's larger than you, whether that is pray, attend a church, attend a different group, practice feelings of gratitude and compassion, peace, meditate. It's a powerful way to modify your brain paths and increase your joy. Do something new, push yourself, get out of your comfort zone, get into a space that you understand that I'm hardwired for joy and that I love something new. Something new makes me refocus my energy, and it gets into a space that my brain is looking for that same hit of adrenaline and endorphin, and not cheap dopamine, not social media, not self-care things that we think are going to make a big difference, but instead this deep peace of feeling better. You can also grant yourself moments of pleasure, especially when you're feeling low. You can do whatever you need to do to create that pleasure. Maybe that's walking down to the water, or staring up at mountains, or calling a best friend, whatever it is, taking a deep breath, because that's the natural way to help the nervous system refocus. Whatever it is. And begin to pay attention to the good, right? A joyous mindset is developed, but it takes practice. And the first thing that we do is give the RAS the instruction to practice it. We also conversely limit the negativity. If we have toxic relationships, or we have a complaining friend, or we're spending time around somebody with a negative mindset, guess what? It influences us directly. And we have to set limits. We have to have boundaries, because what we're doing is we're creating a space that isn't healthy for ourselves. And the RAS is going to say, I didn't know that you didn't want these negative feelings, so I brought you more. No thanks, right? You have to focus your efforts on finding what works for you. That doesn't mean focus all on money or focus all on spirituality. What we're looking for is the centered peace, the centered place that feels good. We want to have experiences. We want to show up. We want to increase the change in our mindsets so that our daily activity changes. This is taking that gravel road. The thought happens. All of these neurons are firing. We get into a space where the RAS says, yes, I want this in my consciousness. And it takes that gravel road and says, fantastic. I'm going to show you how to increase joy in your life. I'm going to reduce those stress hormones, improve your pain, relieve your depression, help you find a space that feels so much better. And you're going to be standing there saying, why did it take me so long to get here? Why was I focusing so much on the complexity of my life? Why was I worrying so much? Why was I trying to control everything? Why was I basing my happiness on others? Why was I feeding drama? Why was I making life so complicated? Why can't I just say, we all get emotional, it's okay. We all have moments that we screw up, it's okay. Why can't I just say life is beautiful, that I have 90% that's working in my favor, and that's what I want? That is exactly what I want. If life is something beautiful, which it is, it means that in order for it to be beautiful, you have to quiet the noise, keep calm, and listen to yourself. The less complicated your life, the better. If you always have challenging times, it means you're making room for challenging times in the brain. If you want more, you have to think more. I'm going to say that again. If you want more, you have to think more. And I don't mean in the frequency of your thought, but I mean more as positive, more as an acceleration, more as a focus that works for you. When you do that, when you think about how everything has the ability to work in your favor, your life changes. And that is an essential step into getting your life together. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life, please follow me on social media if you're not already, on Instagram, Clapper, TikTok, Facebook, Insight Timer, YouTube, all of the places. And you can also go to my website, getyourlifetogethergirl.com, for books, merch, courses that I talked about right here in this episode, and even get into a few of the blogs that help you harness the power of your happiness, mindfulness, and inner strength. I want to thank you once again for being the most important part of this community. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.